be neat. Okay. Okay, so are you getting good signal? All right. Cool, and audio levels are okay? All right, cool. All right, so this is a little talk where I'm going to introduce a tool that I've done as a tech segment on Security Weekly. And this is something that I'm going to be doing a whole lot of playing with over the next couple months because it's super powerful and super fun. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. Hi, I'm Mick. And you can hit me up on Twitter at BetterSafetyNet. And my work email address is mick@blackhillsinfosec. Or you can just say hi to me. I'm not that shy, obviously, because I'm giving a talk. So a couple things I want to let you know about me. I love my job. I mean, I really freaking love my job. One of the best bits of advice that I've got was a couple years ago from a lawyer friend of mine who said, Mick, you don't ever want to be the smartest guy in the room. And so I joined Black Hills, and there's no chance of that happening anytime soon. So I work at Black Hills InfoSec. We're a very small boutique security company, but we do some really freaking cool research. And you know, even the interns there are ninjas. Case in point, one Luke Baggett. Luke is one of our interns, and he is quite the ninja. And I actually had to redo my slides today because at 4:22 in the AM today, Luke sent me an email and he said, hey Mick, I totally rewrote your tool and it does all these amazing magical things. And I was like, holy cow, Luke, that's awesome. So I was really amazed and happy and it was great, but then there's a problem. And we're going to get into that problem in a little bit. The problem was that PowerShell has different versions. And there's a very big difference between PowerShell version 2 and PowerShell version 3. PowerShell version 2 is what's on Windows 7. PowerShell version 3 is what's on Windows 8. This is a Windows 7 box. Luke has a Windows 8 box. Those of you who code PowerShell know exactly where this is going. When I took the code and I looked at Luke's code, and it is gorgeous, beautiful code. In fact, it puts mine to shame. So good job, Luke. The issue is that it won't run. It simply doesn't run, and that's a big problem. The reason why is Windows 7 is going to be the de facto corporate standard build for on potentially a decade, if we have XP as any sort of guideline. So that means we're stuck with PowerShell version 2. And I was agonizing about, you know, am I going to have a powercat for version 2 and a powercat for version 3, and that totally stinks. And then Ethan came up with a great idea of, well, why don't you just check to see which particular instance of PowerShell you have, and then you can have different functions as appropriate or make the appropriate calls. So that's cool, but that's also bad because there's a lot of work to do yet. And what I'm going to be doing is taking Luke's version of the V1 and my V2 version and merging them. And people are probably thinking, wow, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun or like a small amount of work. And the answer is, no, it's not. But I've got a Sans Gold paper to write on this, and I've already paid. So I've hit the point of no return. So I've got to get this tool done, and I got to write a paper about it. So that's a pretty strong motivation. So I want to thank two folks in particular, one of whom I'm happy to see here is Daryl Hyland. I was kind of noodling around with this a couple months ago, and he said, hey, just go to town with this, make it nice and evil, and everybody's going to love it. And so I did. And the other person I want to thank is Ed Scotus. Ed is the one who made the class 504, the Hacker Techniques and Incident Handling at the SANS Institute, and he also made 560, the pen test class at SANS. And I'm fortunate enough to be a community instructor with SANS. I see a couple of my former students here in the crowd. Hey guys. The thing that's awesome about these classes is we go over a ton of tools, and one of them that we focus a lot on is Netcat. And a lot of people miss the point on Netcat. They're just like, man, big deal. You're sending some data from one machine to another. And I see like the more seasoned pen testers are like, oh my God, that's like the holy grail. It's great. So we need to know the history and what's out there so that we can learn and use these tools effectively. And when I'm referring to netcat throughout this talk and on out, I'm referring to more of the tools that have netcat-like functionality. So the original one is netcat, or NC, and this was on Unix systems. And it has a variety of different modes of operation, mainly, though, that summarizes into two camps. There's a netcat client and a netcat listener. Netcat listener just simply opens up a port, and then it will either print to standard out or do some action that you tell it to do. The client simply allows you to, you can think of the client as like telnet on steroids, because you just tell it a IP address or a DNS name and a port to interact with, and it goes and does that. So using those two together, you can combine them, do some really magical things. You can use it as a file transfer tool. You can use it as a way to pivot in an environment where you have one listener and one client on the same machine, and it allows you to basically hop around firewalls. So this is really key functionality. Another tool that you might not have, that fewer people have played with, which is a crying shame, is DNSCat by Martin Bos. If you've not played with it, do so. Do yourself a favor. It is amazing on lockdown environments. The thing that's nifty about DNSCat is that the communications aren't, instead of having it be a IP address and a port, the communication is over fully RFC compliant DNS communications channels. So if you are in an environment where you're able to resolve external IP addresses to a fully qualified domain name, DNSCat will work. It's not going to make any speed records. It's not the fastest tool out there, but when it comes to exfiltration or dealing with lockdown environments, accept no substitutions, it's the best one out there. Now, DNSCat just had release 2 not too long ago, so check it out. Can't speak highly enough about it. Now, if you're just getting into netcat, I would recommend that instead of using NC, that you look into NCAT. NCAT is a component of the Nmap framework. And what NCAT has over NC, the old school netcat, is you can do things like SSL communications. You can do over UDP, which might not be totally reliable, but sometimes you only have UDP ports open, so you got to do with what you got to do with. So highly recommend NCAT. The other thing that I'd like to point out is, oddly enough, a lot of antivirus engines will flag both traditional netcat and DNSCat as malware because they say it could be used for command and control, and that's obviously bad. NCAT, because it's part of the Nmap project, is okay. The logic escapes me here, folks. It's the same functionality, does the same stuff, but they're like, hey, it's by Fyodor and crew. Thumbs up. I don't know why it's allowed, but it works. So if you're pen testing in a Windows environment, you may have better luck using NCAT. So just a little pro tip. So all of these tools have a real happy, nice thing is in that they're very simple, but how you play with them makes them very powerful. And what I recommend that you think of them as Legos. How you configure them and tweak them allow you to do different things in the network. Many networks are designed from a single point attacking another single point. And very precious few networks, in my experience, have ever been able to withstand proper pivoting. Because if you get into one zone that's allowed to talk to another zone, then go to another zone that's allowed to talk to another, you can just leapfrog and hopscotch across your network. You can actually, if you get a bunch of pen testers together and they start like swapping war stories, a fun game to play is how many hops have you ever had to go in a pen test in order to get to the crown jewels? You know, and sometimes people will be like, yeah, it was really weird. I had 5 netcat relays going, you know. It's really, really cool and interesting. So highly recommend that you learn how to use these tools because they will take your pen testing, and if you're a defender, they'll take your defense to the next level because you'll understand what the attackers really are doing. Now there's a big problem when it comes to using these tools if you're a pen tester or if you're an attacker. And the big problem is that there's no built-in version of Netcat for Windows, which that makes me sad, because I like Netcat. Now, let's do a survey. How many people here are pen testers? Do pen test type stuff? Okay. How many people have been on a pen test engagement where the client says, okay, here's the deal. We're going to give you a jump host that you can log into, but no external tools. Have you ever had that? Yeah, that totally stinks because the bad guys aren't going to follow these rules, but sometimes you have to live within the rules of engagement. So what you need to do is use your existing components as well as you can. Now, fortunately, we've got some neat tools at our disposal. One of my favorite ones out there is Windows Remote Service. Love it, or Windows Remote Shell. The problem is it's not everywhere. In fact, it's, I would say, fairly rare to experience in the real world. You're just not going to run into it. One of my favorite ones to play with is WMI. WMI allows you to do an amazing amount of stuff. The catch is that you're not always going to be able to do all the attacks that you would want to do. WMI requires that you know the specific objects that you're going to be interacting with, and sometimes you're not going to have appropriate permissions to do things like process call create, which is how you remotely get things going without a tool like PsExec. So, I humbly submit that powercat could be another tool to add into this arsenal of things to do that allow us with remote interaction. So I'm going to give you a real quick demo of how powercat works here. Okay, why is this not doing that? Let's do this. Okay, so what we have here is, this is a, can everyone see, is this big enough or should I zoom in a little more? You okay? Zoom in, all right. All right, so this is just a good old-fashioned Linux crunch bang instance. And so we've got the good old school Netcat. And Netcat, like I said, has different modes. The one that you're probably most familiar with is going to be Netcat Listener, where you simply say netcat-l-p, and then you specify the port. So we're going to use the 444 port. So now what's happened is it's opened up this port, and it's basically got this service listening in, and as soon as we have something connect to it, it's going to start appearing on it. And because I haven't had it do anything, it's just going to echo this to standard out. So it's going to be kind of like a weird chat looking type thing. So, oops. Oh, there we go. All right, so then if we've got powercat, we can do powercat client, and then we'll put the IP address that we want to interact with, 192.168.124.48, and then the port. We just see this thing hanging there. Well, that's to be expected. We now have to put in input, so, uh-oh, demo fails already. All right, hold on just a second. I'm going to undo magnification for just a bit. Oh boy. Hold on here. Let's get this going. I'll get back to the magnification in just a moment. Okay. Let's make sure I'm even on the right machine. Oh, I did it to 148. That'll explain it. So yeah, you definitely have to accuracy counts here. All right. All right, so now I can do things like this where I type in hi, and it appears on this other machine. Now, whenever I teach this class, whenever I teach folks netcat for SANS, not a lot, but you know, it happens enough that I'm kind of used to it, where somebody will say, big deal. You took text from one machine and sent it to another. And I'm like, I know, that's so awesome, right? And they're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, what, you think that it's boring? And they're like, yep. And I'm like, your network is going to be a pain to defend if you have that attitude. Because what we're doing is the attacker is now choosing how the traffic in the network goes through. That is like game over. Things get really horrible and really, really scary. Because this is the key point that you need to remember about these classes of tools, is that they don't have to just send things like standard text back and forth. You can do things like sending a shell back and forth. So in this instance, I can do something like this. I can invoke powercat, and I can make it be a listener. And I can have it be listening on a port. We'll do the same port just for giggles. But this is the key that makes netcat tools and items like this so scary, and why pen testers and attackers love to work with it. You can have it execute something when someone connects to it. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to execute cmd.exe. So now I hit enter, and nothing happens. It's just up there waiting. So now, when I, holy cow, this is, hold on just a second, folks. Magnification is not my friend today. So now, when I'm in the, okay, so now when I'm in my Linux system, I can now make the netcat connection. Let's get this. Thank you, usability, Microsoft. I can now make a netcat connection to my listener on my Windows machine, and I would do so like this: 192.168.124.1 on port 4444, and I hit enter. Again, it doesn't do anything until I tell it to. But now, when I type a command like dir, boom, I get the directory listing of the directory that I'm in. So this is freaking scary. This is really, really bad. Because now I can do any sort of command that I want under the user context who created that netcat listener. And if you're an attacker, depending on how you get this to happen, maybe you've weaponized a PDF, or maybe you hang around for JOFS talk and hear about how to weaponize an Excel document. You could actually use this technique and have it kick this. So you might get an account that you don't necessarily know who you have. So you can do something like this: echo %username %, and hit enter. And then you'll see, boom, user account is Douglas. So then you can start doing enumeration type activities. This is all using native PowerShell. The reason this is so cool and scary at the same time, hey, antivirus, what you gonna catch? Oh, that's right, you can't. Because this is all built in native stuff. Sorry. Have fun audio editing that out, if you do. So this is really cool, really, 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 like, excellent stuff. Oh, and I just launched another program. What the hell? All right, let's go back to the prezo. All right. So as you can see, this is a real fun, neat thing to play with, right? But I've got a couple goals on this project. So my first thing is I wanted to learn PowerShell, because I'm not a PowerShell hacker. And I'll tell you what, I probably could have done better in terms of picking a thing to learn PowerShell with. The reason why is the system.net objects, which are used to handle the socket communication in PowerShell, are crazy. They are straight up insane, and they make no damn sense. We'll get into that in a little bit, which is part of the reason why Luke's version 3 code does not work in a version 2 environment. And when I explain it again, you're just going to be like, what the heck? Just let it go. It makes no damn sense. I will say that a couple more times, too. Now, the main goal, though, is I want to have all the functionality of Netcat built in to this PowerShell instance. I'm not entirely there yet, but we're doing pretty good and moving it along. The other idea is for it to be a standalone script. I want this to be just one little item that you can transfer over versus having to get a couple different module components. Depending on how you do this, you might be able to do so with a very light touch on the system. You may be able to get this script on the system and execute it without creating forensics artifacts. There's a couple things that I'm playing with, not entirely 100% sure that we're there yet, but got some interesting ideas. One thing I want to spend some time on is talking about PowerShell version 2. PowerShell version 2 is Windows 7 only. You can install more up-to-date versions on PowerShell. PowerShell 4 is the latest one that's most standard, but there's versions 5 and 6 are in beta right now. But 4 is the latest that you will find in production environments. The issue is that PowerShell version 2 is really weird. It's very painful to, well, let me put it this way. I find it painful to develop in. There might be somebody who's like, PowerShell 2 is elegant, in which case the only thing I can say is you must have been a PowerShell version 1 coder, because PowerShell v2 is really, really bizarre. And the issue is, why suffer through the pain? The deal is we need to shoot for the lowest common denominator. PowerShell version 2 is everywhere. If you're running PowerShell version 3, PowerShell version 2 will work. It doesn't work the other way around. And so that's why we have to stick it out and suffer through version 2, which stinks. Now, the biggest pain when it comes to PowerShell is the sockets on version 2. And the issue is synchronous versus asynchronous sockets. Those of you who are used to normal Netcat, where you have a Netcat terminal or a client and a server, or a listener and a client interacting, you type something, and as a command's outputting, you see it going on, and that's asynchronous communication. Unfortunately, and this is the thing that I didn't know when I began doing this work, PowerShell version 2 does not support synchronous socketed communications. If you know how to make this happen, please, please, I beg you, come up, talk to me, hit me on Twitter, anything. I've been trying desperately to get this working. The issue is with synchronous sockets, when you make a command, you have to wait for that command to finish executing before you are allowed to interact with standard out and standard error. It's horrible. It would be the equivalent of like having a conversation with somebody and saying, hello, how are you doing? I hope you're having a great day. And then you got to like just sit there and wait for a little bit before they say their response back. I don't know if you noticed, but when I was doing things like echoing %username%, it took like a little beat before it came back and said Douglas. It wasn't because the system was running hot and heavy. I mean, it's just got PowerPoint running in a simple PowerShell script. No, the issue is with the socketed communication being synchronous. So I have a demo that points out just how horrific this is. So one of the things that Ed Scotus points out in his PowerShell class, or not PowerShell class, but in a command line Kung Fu, is that DOS does not have any sleep functions. And sometimes you need to have a sleep type function in order for some timing thing or a timing-based attack. So the way that you do timing in DOS is a cheat. You ping the local host, and then you do a -n with the number of seconds that you want to wait. So here's how this works. All right. Whoops. Why is this not duplicating? All right, there we go. Hopefully that does it. All right, so if I do something like ping 127.1, and then I do N5, like so. Let me zoom in. Not snip. Let me zoom in. I can now hit enter, and for 5 seconds, 1 second for each localhost ping, that's how long it takes to run. But because we're doing asynchronous communication, it's just popping up as you display. The problem is, with PowerShell version 2, you don't have that luxury. So, and the reason I'm pointing this out is, I'll explain in a little bit. This is a big deal, though. So let me zoom out. Go here, get my listeners going again. All right, so now, you can see that I've got my communications. I'm doing things like dir, etc. But if I enter a command like this, I do ping 127.1.0.1 and 5, we can now count 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, 4 1000, 5 1000, boom, and then it appears, because that's just a fundamental limitation on how the socketed communication works. And what's really a pain in the butt, and Ethan can attest, I was actually doing the first iteration of this in the back of a class that we were teaching at Vegas, and I jumped up and started yelling, and I was all frustrated when I got it working. The thing is, I had it working that entire day. I just wasn't taking this timing delay into account. So I would do a dir, and I'd be like, damn it, it's not working, and close it, and then go back to the code and be like, okay, let's give this another try. And then when I finally realized it, I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. So that's what's going on here. That's how it works. So that's the one thing you need to be aware of if you're in a PowerShell version 2 environment. Yes, sir?
So if you have an application like Ping where you don't specify the count, it's just going to sit there forever?
Well, okay, great question. So the question is, if you have an application that doesn't specify a count, will it go on forever? In Windows, the default is to do it 4 times. So you'd be fine. But what you would run into a problem is if you did this. If you did a ping -t, exactly, this would never come back.
And then if you break it, it's breaking out a netcat, right? It's not breaking
Yes,
out a program.
correct. So the issue is that this is still a little janky. I'm hoping that I can add some functionality to handle that better. There's other limitations too I'd like to point out. For instance, this tool does not handle, at present, does not handle very well when you drop into other interactive shells. So if you were to do something like this, let's say you were, one of my favorite things to do when I get into a Windows machine is to do this, not attack, but this little thing to get enumeration. So you do net sh wlan show all. So you do this, and it takes a moment, and what it will do is list out all the SSIDs and their signal strengths. You can then use a tool like Google or Apple's locator to geolocate very precisely. Those of you who went to Larry Pesci's talk will understand this concept. Those of you who have ever used Tim Tome's tool Honey Badger will be familiar with this concept. This is the command line way of getting that sort of information. But you don't have to just do it as a one-liner. If you did this in PowerShell, you'd be ace, or in powercat version 2, you'd be aces. But if you did this, if you did net sh wlan, whoops, net sh, it drops you to the net sh shell, and that doesn't work at present. Interactive stuff doesn't work. So if you do a thing like this, you can do, like, this is legit. You can do, okay, like, here's one, WMIC Nick get time of last reset. So this is a query to the WMI to see when the NIC was last reset. Does anybody know when the NIC's reset in the Windows environment? Come on, I'm not going to yell at you guys. I'm not going to give you homework if you get it wrong. Take a guess. Did somebody say restart? Yeah, that's right, restart. Woo! Okay, so you hit enter, and it will take a moment, and I've got a lot of different VPNs and virtual stuff going on, so that's why I've got so many NICs. But using this is a crude way of seeing how often a machine has been rebooted. One of the things that I love to do from a post-exploitation phase is to see how often a system has been rebooted. Why do I want to see how often a system is rebooted? How long my shell might be there, that's one thing. What's another? Patching, yeah. If it's been up for over 30 days, I have a real strong indicator that that box isn't patched. So this would be a legit query to do, like, as long as it's a one-liner. But if I wanted to do WMIC like that and invoke the WMIC shell, like, you've lost it. The powercat just can't handle it yet. If you're in a PowerShell version 3 environment, though, with the asynchronous communication, it does work. So there's hope. It's just right now, version 2 is janky. One of the things that I plan on doing as I merge Luke's version of PowerCat with mine is making it do a little warning saying, hey, you're in a version 2 environment, make sure everything's a one-liner, just so that you can kind of have a little bit of safety there. So great question, yeah. All right, trying to think of, okay, why is, oh boy, one of those days. Okay, so one thing I want to point out, with Luke's PowerShell version 3 is really going to be the wave of the future for this thing, which is kind of nifty because, like, it hasn't even really kicked off yet and it's already got a new lease on life. So I'm really interested to see how this thing merges. In a bit, I'm going to be posting the GitHub to where this version that I showed you is, so you can play with it and have fun. But I would say within the next 2-3 weeks, maybe a month or so, I'll have them merged, and I'll send a tweet out when that glorious day happens. But in the interim, right now it's the more janky version. So yeah, that's where we're at right now with it. So are there any other questions about PowerCat? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. So the question is, can you not run a shell in a shell with the version that we have? For version 2 PowerShell, because of the socketed communication, that's correct. We can't do that yet. Yes, that should work. Let's give that a try. I don't know. I've not tried NetSH. We're going to go off-road and let's try this. What could possibly go wrong? You know what? We'll find out here. Hey. Okay, so we got that set up. This ought to work. We'll find out. Yeah, Oh, man, demo fail from a non-technical standpoint. Okay, cool. All right. So here we go, setting up the powercat to run on this and then kick out net sh. Let's see what happens. All right, so got that started. Got this. Now remember, when you make the connection normally, you don't get your $$ prompt. So I don't know if I'm in net shell or not. So it would be wlan show all. Fingers crossed. Now, I think that it's it's in client mode, like chat mode. Huh. I'll have to play with that. That's a logic loop error. So, hey, congratulations, you have the first bug report. Okay, so yeah, I'll have to play with that. One of the other ones that I want to play with is WMIC. Those of you who know me know that I love my WMIC. You can do a lot of powerful stuff with it. And then also, I would like to be able to serve up PowerShell within that. Whenever I try to do that, I get some really weird object handling issues. And if you're familiar enough with how PowerShell invokes itself, please come and see me, because it gets very squirrely. And that's why I was kind of laughing when I said I should have picked something a lot easier from a PowerShell learning standpoint. One of the other things that's very weird with PowerShell, at least version 2, is that when I try to make it as handling functions, rather than having it be a monolithic block of code, I have one that does open listener, one that does open client. When you try to pass a stream object, PowerShell just cannot handle the concept, at least version 2. Version 3 does it just fine, but version 2 will only pass Boolean, numeric, and alphanumeric strings back and forth between function calls. And so I hit one of the PowerShell communities on their message board, and I said, hey, why is this? That just seems like a really weird thing. It's an object-oriented language that's like an artificial thing, it's just an object type. And they're like, yeah, upgrade. I'm like, I can't. And they're like, well, yeah, no, here's the download. And I'm like, well, no, I'm in a Windows 7 environment. And they're like, Windows 7 can do up to PowerShell 4. And I'm like, oh, you don't understand. I'm trying to break things. And they're like, wait, why are we helping you again? And so that was a social engineering fail on my part. So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. Making do with what we've got in PowerShell version 2 is very, very... you almost have to be in the right frame of mind in order to do this, because it'll just be like, it should work. And yes, it should, but it doesn't. So, any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, you said PowerShell v2 doesn't support synchronous or asynchronous.
Okay, great clarification question. The question was, does PowerShell, which one version 2 support synchronous or asynchronous? PowerShell version 2, here I'll even show you the thing here. This is, that's Luke's version. Or no, this is my version. Don't even know my own code. It only supports synchronous, so I'm trying to find where that is. We're creating the listener here. Yeah, so this... Got my argument validation, display help. Open listener, here we go. So I've even got this highlighted. The sock.accept TCP client async is something that's version 3 and up. And the thing that's really annoying about the TechNet, so let me back up a second. I love MSDN and I love Microsoft TechNet. It is well documented, and whoever does that, if you're on that project, if you're on that project and you're watching this video, I owe you lots of beers. So just hit me up. I'll ship them. I'll do whatever. I'm very grateful of the documentation that they have. It is glorious. The issue, though, that I have with the net or the system.net sockets one is that they aren't exactly forthcoming with which components, which subcomponents or methods are restricted to particular versions. And so I'll look at the TechNet stuff and they'll have like version 4 PowerShell command options, and they don't flag them as being version 4 only. And so that's kind of a pain. So that's why I say you have to be kind of like, almost the right frame of mind in order to do this. Otherwise, this thing magically flies. I don't know what happens, but it seems to take flight. Now, I've referred to it multiple times, and I got to say, like, again, hats off to Luke for what he did with this PowerCat, his version. I can tell that dude's a better coder than me. Like, I'm a hack of a hacker, and so my code is going to be quite janky. And so I'm actually going to be taking on his particular coding style as I merge this too. So if you look at the GitHub version, don't think that this is how you should be coding. It is not. It is clearly a learning project, and hey, it works. So, but you'll notice in version 3, he can take advantage of asynchronous communications right here. And it's when I did put it into a system that I have at home that's a Windows 8 system, and I VPN'd into my home network, and I was not going to tempt the demo gods and try to VPN live into a Windows 8 machine and doing PowerCat. Like, that's crazy. I'm not going to tempt them that much. But the thing that's really nice is it's lightning fast. It feels like you have a shell right there because it's streaming it both ways all the times. So that's really cool, and I look forward to working that in. Yeah, question?
Is there any functionalities that build into this that extend what that can actually do? I mean, it sounds like so far we've talked about essentially duplicating that functionality.
Well, so the question is, does it extend the functionality of Netcat, or could I implement more? And the answer is sure, I could. I haven't really run into a scenario where I need more than Netcat. I mean, it's very, very powerful, but I think of Netcat as a scalpel versus like a Swiss Army knife that has a lot of other features. And then, like, if I need logging or whatever, I can use some other, like, redirect to a text file or something. I want it to just be a communication point from one host to another host over a particular medium. But if you want to get in on the project and, like, extend it, hey, have at it, man. It would be cool. Yeah. Oh, okay, so great question. Thank you, sir. So the question is, does PowerCat support persistence? No, not at all. This is exactly the same functionality that Netcat has. Netcat is just a communication thing. It's up to you to, like, if you wanted to have this do persistence, you absolutely could. You could put this as like an job to have it kick off and open a connection. You could do like any of the registry run keys to do this. So I'm trying to keep it very, very similar to how Netcat itself is. Great question, though. Yeah. Yeah.
So with the asynchronous one,
Mhm.
the problems with like responses getting integrated with each other. Like, say you picked up a long-run job, and then it would return right away. So you type, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you type another command, and then you're getting responses from each.
So the question is, can you have scenarios where, because with the asynchronous mode, that you could have like a call and response getting like confused, basically, where they get interleaved potentially, right? So yes, that potentially could happen, but I would think that the system net sockets library would handle that because it's just a part of that. But honestly, I got the code at 4:22 a.m. Back off, Ethan. Now, so I work with Ethan, guys. It's all harmless hazing that we do to one another. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could happen. One of the things that I'm really interested in with the asynchronous component is what happens over high latency links, where that sort of a thing could happen. I'm really interested to see like what happens if I try to do asynchronous communication over UDP. That's going to get kind of interesting, I think. So we'll have to do some testing. Okay, so the comment was, I wonder if you can make it flag where it would do synchronous or asynchronous. Certainly, once we have them merged, I could have it artificially believe that it's in PowerShell version 2. The issue that we're not ever going to, until we can figure out the trick of doing asynchronous in PowerShell v2, we're not going to be able to have that option in v2. Yes, sir? Oh. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay. All right, for the internet, I've got a new hero here, and sir, do you like beer? Okay, well, you're going to have a couple beers on me if you don't mind, because I'd like to pick your brain on how that works. One of the things, so he was talking about how C# has the capability to do that, and one of the things that really frustrated me, and again, I'm a novice PowerShell person, is that there's a weird, like if you were to draw a Venn diagram of the components that C# has, which is a very full and robust and nice language, and PowerShell is full and robust and nice, and they have like this weird overlap, but there's certain things where it doesn't have. And so some of the ones that I ran into were how the NetSockets class, or the system NetSockets class, has some methods that are C# or .NET style methods that are missing from PowerShell, but they're using the same syntax. And there's no way to know until you get that nice red text that says that method is unsupported, and you just go, oh. So I'd love to see if we can get that going. That'd be awesome. Yeah. Cool. That was actually one of the hopes of the talk, is that I would get somebody that could say some stuff, so thanks. Any other questions? Yeah. About how large is it? It's actually not that bad. Let's take a look here. Really? Here, let's do it this way. Yeah, it's not that large. It's actually smaller than the binary for the old school Netcat. But I don't have everything fully implemented that I want. Like there's a couple other features that I would like that would hopefully make it a little easier, and I want the help features to be built out, so it'll get a little bigger. Still a work in progress. Yep. So really cool questions. Yes, sir. So the comment is, because PowerShell is very object-oriented, have I considered passing PowerShell objects through powercat to another instance? Nope. I'll be honest, haven't considered that. That could actually have some really interesting implications if you can do that. If that works, we'll have to chat too. If that works, that could really screw up the forensic side pretty bad, because you would have capabilities that you ought not to have. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, great comments. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to fly through these next couple little bits. Oh geez. Okay, I'll tell you what, let me do this. I'm just going to skip ahead. Whoops. Windows, display fails. Okay, so at the risk of sounding a bit like an acceptance speech, yeah, I love you, man. I wanted to thank BHIS. You guys have been giving me crap and like helping me understand that I got to get this going. Jim Shoemaker from SANS was the first person to use this tool and really kicked my butt. I really dug his feedback. Carlos Perez, all the coaching, I really appreciated, amigo. Gracias. I want to thank a bunch of folks that work at a large company. One might say they have nationwide coverage. So for those of you who are there, thanks. Also want to thank a mysterious Mr. X. Those of you who listen to the Security Weekly podcast might know him. Some say his name might be Bob. I don't know. Hey, Mr. X. And I want to thank DerbyCon again. This is a fun con to talk to. I really appreciate you guys for being here, asking awesome questions. And without further ado, here's the code. So, and again, this is the janky version. This is my version, and I will be merging and making many changes based off of Luke's stuff and hopefully getting V2 to do synchronous or asynchronous. So, thank you guys. Play with this. It's going to be fun. So, and while I'm tearing down, I want to point something out. Joff Thayer here has a very cool PowerShell thing that allows you to do TCP port scanning. TCP port scanning plus this equals a really bad day for the defenders. So you will be able to find the ports that you need to, or that are permitted through the firewall. So it's really cool stuff. Thank you.